Okay, so giving you guys a heads up. So first of all, I had my international students take their test yesterday. Okay, which means I can finally start grading them. I will try to start grading them slowly throughout the week, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so just be patient with me. Give me some time. Okay. Now, the second thing is that we are moving on today to what's called inheritance. Okay, we're going to get a brief introduction to inheritance today, 4 of the rules that we need to know about inheritance. And then after that, what we're going to do is we will then move on to what's it called, back to arrays. Okay, but for right now, what I need you to do is need you to make a new project in a new class. And in this project, what I want you to do is I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Okay, what I want you to do is you're going to make a student class and then a tester class. In the student class, I want you to have I want you to have a default constructor, and I want you to have a standard constructor that accepts parameters that initializes all the global variables. The global variables that you're going to have are string name, int grade, and int age. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do that right now. Okay. Hey Siri, set timer for 5 minutes. Okay, so so basically what I've just done is you have basically 4 minutes, 50 seconds, getters and setters for all. Go ahead and do that right now. Okay. About 2 minutes left, guys. All right. So here we go. Actually, oops, let me take attendance real quick. All right, here we go. So let me share my screen. All right, so if you take a look, what do we have? Okay, so what I've got is class student string, private string name, int grade, and age. I've got a regular diff constructor, and then I have my default constructor. I have my accessors, and I have my mutators, okay? Now, are all of you guys there? Did we all get this? Yes or no? Thumbs up. Were you all able to get this based on what I told you guys to do? Thumbs up, yes or no? Perfect, okay. Now what we're also gonna do is we're gonna add a method. Okay, we're gonna add another method. We're gonna say public, something that a normal student can't normally do. Public Boolean can vote. Okay, we're going to just say return. Okay, public Boolean can vote, return false. Okay, now let's talk about inheritance. Okay, inheritance is basically a way of absorbing a class's contents and then basically refining it and making it your own, really touching it up, okay? So for example, take a look at this, okay? What we're going to do is, now key thing, in order for you to make this work, it doesn't, this normally, you don't have to do this in any other one, but in Eclipse, you kind of have to. In yours up here where it says class student, get rid of the word public or you're gonna have an error. Just make it class student. By default, all classes are public, so don't worry about it. Just get rid of, for some reason it errors in Eclipse. I don't know why. It wants you to put it in another file. Can you do that? Yes, you're more than welcome to, but we wanna just keep it as is right now, okay? Now, go outside of the class. So this is end of the student class. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Oops, not that big. Okay. All right. So this is the end of the student class. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to say class college student. And what we're going to do is we are going to say extends student. Class college student extends student. Okay, the subclass always extends the superclass. Let me repeat that again. The subclass extends the superclass. College student is the subclass, okay? Now, okay, to put this in perspective, right now for where it says name student, I'm just gonna put STU, okay, for right now, all right? Now, basically the extends keyword is a programming way of saying copy everything in here and paste it into here. Notice right now, there is nothing in college student, correct? So if I go to my tester class and I say college student, okay, imaginary situation. So college student, we'll say Armand, okay? Armand, Armand equals new college student, okay? Again, guys, fictional situation. So what happens? So what happens is, take a look. When I say Armand dot, I've got get age, I've got get class, get grade, get name. I've got set age, set grade, set. I also have can vote. I have gotten all of those. So for example, if I say sysout, and I say Armand dot can vote, or let's say Armand dot name. Okay, dot get name. And I run this. And I look at my console, it says Stu. Okay. Because it has inherited everything. Okay. Now, the one thing that we're seeing right now is, notice, Kennedy, does my constructor have parameters?
No.
No, it doesn't. And the reason that that is okay is because why?
Because it will just set it to null or 0.
Nope. I need a little bit more reasoning. Benny.
Because you have a default constructor.
Because I have a default constructor. Remember that if you have a default constructor, that takes precedence. Okay. Now, I wanted to just show you guys this because this is like the easy way of doing inheritance. You won't get this way 9 times out of 10, even in real life programming. More than likely, you'll get this. I'm going to delete the default constructor. You will get a regular constructor. And notice now that I have errors. So once I save this, okay, I have errors here. I have errors everywhere. Okay. Now, okay. First rule again was using the keyword extends. Now, if you have to write a free response of a class extending another class, you will get a point for knowing, for being able to write this statement, you would get a point. Okay. For understanding how to inherit a class. Okay. Now, rule number 2, if the superclass has a constructor that accepts parameters, the subclass must have one that accepts parameters. Okay. Not even a default one. It has to have one that accepts parameters. So I have to say college or public college student. And I have to say string name, int grade, int age. So let me do that. There we go. Okay, now this is where it gets a little bit not easier, but it's okay. What we have to do is we have to initialize the variables. We have to initialize all of these variables the same way that we did in the superclass. So we use the keyword super. And what I do is I simply say name, grade, and age. Now super, again, what super is a keyword that basically is saying when you put the parameters in it, at least in a constructor, okay, because as you can see, a constructor is not really a method, okay? Super is used in other methods as well. We'll get into that later, but in a constructor sense, what super is basically saying, okay, take the parameters you have and initialize the global variables in the same way that you did it in the superclass. Does that make sense? Basically, super saying follow the protocol. Okay, you've got your variables that you're using. Follow the protocol. Follow the protocols for constructing in the superclass down here. Yes, Ben.
So I just want to make sure I got this right. So it's
By the way,
basically,
Ben, by the way, I could barely see your hand. Next time, just politely interrupt me.
okay. So I just want to make sure I understand. So does it work in a similar way like that extends work just for the I guess overloaded constructor or the constructor with parameters?
You didn't have one coherent question there. You need to reorganize your thoughts and ask again.
I'm asking, so does the way that it works, does it just grab the parameters from the superclass?
No. Okay, you have inherited everything here. The only thing that super has done is super is basically a way of saying it's copied the initialization process. Extends is basically a way of saying throw everything that was in here into here. It's a fancy way of saying copy paste. Super, however, is specifically the protocol for which you initialized. That's what super.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say that they're necessarily the same, because you have to go a step further. If it was the same, we wouldn't even need to do this. One is basically copy paste. One is copying a process. Okay.
Okay. Got you.
Now, I will see some people do this. Private string name. Don't do that. Don't make another local. You will screw up your program. Do not do that. Okay. If this exists in the superclass, let it be. However, what is something that a college student can do?
Oh,
They can vote. Okay. So what if we did this? Private Boolean vote. Okay. Now I don't need, now here's the other thing is, so there's two ways that I can do it. I can say vote equals true, right? I can say vote equals true, or I can say Boolean vote. I can say Boolean vote, and then this dot vote equals vote. Either way works. The key thing is this: any new local variables do not go in super. Okay. The other thing with super, which is different than methods, super must be the first line in your constructor, in an inherited constructor. Notice that when I put it here, technically, theoretically, it should do the same thing, but it doesn't. Okay. Super must be the first line in your constructor. Okay. All right. So again, rule 1, extends, the use of extends, which is the fancy way of saying copy and paste. Everything, or the subclass, extends or inherits from the superclass. Student is the superclass. Okay. College student is the subclass. Rule number 2, if the superclass has a constructor, the subclass has a constructor. Okay. Number 3, if the constructor takes parameters, which it does, which is basically, this would be like almost like 2A, but its own rule, you need to use the keyword super. Okay. You take the same, you still have to construct it the same way that you did with student, but you can also start extending and making it your own, asking for more parameters. Okay. And then super must be the first line. Okay. Now, rule number 4 of inheritance, and this is where I was thinking of Benny and I was thinking of Kennedy, because they kind of did something like this on the quiz. Okay. Let's say we're going to make a toString method. Let's make a toString method. Okay. So we're going to say public string toString. And I just want to print out the age and the grade. This is where Kennedy and Benny, your thinking was right. Okay. I just didn't want to say it because it was a little too early. When you're dealing with inheritance, when you do inheritance, okay, when you inherit private variables, you lose direct access to them. So for example, if I say super name, if I were in the super class, it is completely legal to do this, right? Or even this. In an inherited class, in the subclass, you lose direct access. Okay, hold on one second. Okay, so what do we do? And this is why they come into play. Get name. This is why we have getters and setters. Okay, I have lost access to, so I have lost access to, how do you say, I have lost access to the direct variables. I can no longer access them, but getters can. What if I need to change the value of my college student's name? The setter can. This is why we have getters and setters. Okay. Basically what you're doing when you are, and I told you guys the cookie cutter approach. Student is the cookie cutter. When I've just extended, I'm basically making another cookie cutter, but with its own little individual traits. Okay. So now if I say whatever string.get name, and then I say plus age or okay, that works. By the way, I'm also allowed to do this. This works with methods as well. Some people just like doing it. Just if you see it on a test or an exam or in your book, know that that's legal. Okay. So get age works. So now if I go back to my tester class, okay, I'm going to say A equals Armand 18, or he's in grade 15. Let's say he is 18 and true. Okay. He has met all the parameters. Okay. So if I now just say A, name Armand, whoops. Okay. Name Armand, age 18. All right. But take a look at this. Student B equals new student. And we'll say, let's say Nick is in 10th grade and he's probably 16. Okay, so take a look at this, all right? And if I print out B, I get a memory address. Okay. They don't know each other exists. Okay. Most of you guys probably get this. Just in my past experience, I've had to explain this to people. Okay. When I made a toString in the college student, it doesn't mean that student got one. As you go down, you're becoming more refined, and more refined. The most you will ever see on the AP exam is 3 levels of inheritance. A, B extends A, C extends B. Okay, that's it. All right. Now, with this, so that being said, so public or class college students extend students, this Boolean vote, he doesn't have a vote. Okay. Nick doesn't have a vote. Nick doesn't have a toString. He just has a member ID. He just has all of this. Anything that you do in the subclass has no effect at all on the superclass. You can't go in and manipulate things. Does that make sense? Okay. Now we're going to get into it later. We can call upon certain things and get them back. We'll get into that later, though. I don't want to confuse you guys. Okay. But this is inheritance. So again, rule 1, use the extends. That's a fancy way of saying copy paste. The subclass extends the superclass. Rule 2, which will almost always happen. If you have if the superclass has a constructor with parameters that accepts parameters, the subclass must have one. Notice also some people make a mistake. They'll make the student thinking, oh, it's got to match. No, it's still, you made a new class. Okay. So you're making the constructor for that new class. Okay. Rule number 3, which is tied to rule 2, use of the super keyword. Once you have put in all the parameters, you need to have at least the parameters that are in the superclass. At minimum, you use the super keyword, and that will take all the variables and initialize them the way that you did it in the superclass. Okay. And that must also be the first line in your constructor. And last, when you inherit, you lose direct access to global variables. Okay. you lose direct access to global variables. Therefore, you must use getters and setters. So I can't change it. I can't change name. My set name can. I can't print out the grade variable. My get grade can. So this is where the getters and setters start taking more of an effect and being a little bit more powerful. Does that make sense? All right. So that's basically class for today. As you can see, guys, we just touched the tip of the iceberg on inheritance. It gets not too much more difficult. You guys are a smart class, but again, as you can see, what did we really learn? We learned 2 new keywords today, extends and super. I think we only learned maybe 3 more keywords, and that's it. Maybe. I got to see. I might be wrong. I'm often wrong. But for the most part, this inheritance is more of a rule of understanding of how programming is done. Okay? So, and we're going to build on this again. Okay, we're going to build on this. Now, I'm going to give you guys a small homework assignment later today. I will more than likely give you probably just a 3-question multiple choice quiz. Okay. It's not going to be difficult at all. Okay. But it's just more about just making sure that you guys are rewatching this video or doing anything that you need to do to make sure that you're caught up. So does anybody have any questions in regards to that?
So what is super in essence actually doing? It's initializing the variables in the parameters, or
so you inherit. So super is kind of like almost like an ultimate setter method. So what super is doing is hold on. No, who is this? Oh God. Sorry, I just got a chair meeting right in the middle. Okay, so what super is basically doing is just you're inheriting the process. So it's basically when you're using super and you have the right parameters, you're basically saying, okay, initialize the global variables that you've inherited with these 3 things that you've gotten from the constructor, or 2 things, or 1 thing. Super is going to do it for you because you don't have direct access. You can't say this dot name anymore. So super is just a way of bypassing that and saying, okay, you've inherited them. Go ahead and we're going to give you special access to allow you this one time to do it because it's necessary. Anybody else? Key mistake, guys, that I see a lot often is you have to remember that super comes first. Super 100% always comes first. Yes, Benny.
So if you give us a question that has everything completely right, but super is the second line of the subclass is wrong.
And I say, yeah, you'll say, oh, it's an error. Super needs to be first. I wouldn't do something like that, but now you've given me thoughts. But it's a legitimate question because I've explained it, right? So it's not really a trick question. Yeah. It's more of your understanding, like, for example, with the swap question. It's more of your understanding, you know what, I didn't check the return states or return values. I should have checked those. So it's more like thinking the constructor is a constructor in the right format. Super's in the wrong place. I got to switch it up. Anybody else? Guys, we got the time. You know, is it lunchtime for you guys or do you have one more class?
lunch?
It's lunch.
Okay. Anybody else?
What was the second rule that you said?
So first rule, again, using the extends, superclass, extends, subclass. Second rule, if the superclass, and this is almost always going to happen. On my quizzes and tests, you might see it not happen. You might see a default constructor, but 99 times out of 100, if the superclass has a constructor that accepts parameters, the subclass must have a constructor that accepts at minimum those parameters. In that order too, don't mix them around. Anybody else?
Mr. Marty?
Yeah.
So if your superclass has, you know, just the default constructor and the overloaded, and you make the subclass, do you have to just make another constructor with parameters, or do you also have to make another default?
Repeat that question again. I think I know what you're saying. Repeat it though.
So if your superclass has a default constructor and an overloaded, when you make the subclass, I know you have to make the superclass or the super thing for the.
So good question. So now I know what you're saying. So as I showed you in that example, you don't have to make a constructor for the one with parameters because the default constructor takes precedent. Can you? Yes. Should you? Yes. And you can still use the keyword super.
Okay. So it'd be the same thing regardless if it has a superclass, or sorry, if it has a default constructor or not.
Yeah, but I mean, the key thing like that I was just showing you is that you could get away with it. It's more like, remember when I was teaching you guys how about creating objects, and you can make one, like, for example, if there's no parameters, there's not enough information to tell whether there's a constructor or not. Remember that? So
Right.
similar thing, it's like, in this instance, if all of a sudden you're making it, let's say, for example, let's say, good question. So let's say I give you this on a test. Let's say that I gave you this on a multiple choice test, okay? Let's say I did this on a multiple choice test and there was no error, and I said student is the student, like let's say I give you college student and then I gave you student. And I said student is the subclass of college student. How many constructors does student have?
Don't you not know?
No, you absolutely know. Let's say there was no error here. Let's say student extends college student. So this one's right. And this one was right. What's the answer? How many constructors does it have?
One.
At least two. All right, I'm sorry. Well, technically two, but at least one.
Okay.
Because you don't know if they made a constructor for this, but because this has no errors, you 100% know there's a default constructor there. Because the default constructor wouldn't give you any errors.
Okay, got you.
Okay. So you at least know there's at least one constructor in the superclass.
Mr. Marty,
Yes.
if you need a toString in your subclass, then your superclass has to have a getter, right? If it doesn't.
Bingo. Very good question. Yes. If you need a toString, you 100% need a getter. Otherwise, you're screwed. You have no way of getting it. Good question. Anytime, if you're ever going to need access to any variable from a superclass, you need to make sure that there's a getter for it. Okay, great question. Anybody else? All righty then. Okay, good class, guys. If anybody no questions, I will get this online and I will see you guys on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Tomorrow.
Thank you.